Do you ever do a racist accent when you're in Japan?
I only do racist accents. Come on.
As in, like not a Japanese racist accent, be like, oh, I'm a beaner. Hey, man, pass the soy sauce, man. Do you ever do that? And they would just have no concept of that being offensive?
You know, I don't even know where to start with this one. Unfortunately, I have not done that. I will do it tomorrow, but this is relevant. I just found out that apparently there's like a cholo subculture here. There's like this underground culture of Japanese people who are really into like cholo aesthetics and cholo attire. I don't know if they know what any of it means, but they think it looks really cool. And I haven't seen any in person yet, but I would really like to.
You disrespect the Mother Teresa. Oh, no, I'm trying to think of like a fucking cholo reference. What would they be offended by? Catholicism, family.
Guadalupe.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Guadalupe.
Cool, bro. Let's try something different. Let's get into the movie concept earlier this week, and then we can do our random bullshit. Let's see if that helps our user engagement. Let's see if we can try and get more subs that way, you fucking pieces of shit out there. Looking for free content from me and David, men
I
of
know.
letters.
I mean, it's the gift that keeps on giving. I don't know how people could be so ungrateful. And if they're ungrateful after today's episode, then I don't know what to tell you. Because
Yeah,
I
you
think
dropped a little teaser about this one when we spoke last week. I don't think I caught that on the recording, but since then I've been intrigued. So take it away. Tell us about the Cambodian Midget Fighting League.
yeah, so this one's a little controversial because it's hard to really prove its authenticity, but I don't really care. For the sake of this video, we are going to assume it's true, and I'm sure something along the lines of it have happened, so why not? It's a true story. And this takes place in Cambodia, and there is a Cambodian midget wrestling league, which it's exactly what it sounds like. They do shows, they fight each other, they fight I almost said normal people. That's not the word I wanted to say. They fight taller people, taller opponents, fighters of all walks of life and whatnot. And despite their popularity, apparently a fan of the Cambodian Midget Fighting League was saying like, okay, like we've seen it. It's getting boring. I have a lion. I bet your midgets, the entire league, cannot defeat my one lion. And the manager of the league said, okay, my fighting midgets accept the challenge. And I don't, but before I finish the story, what's great and frustrating about this, it doesn't say whether the midgets agreed to that, whether like, yeah, we'll fight the lion, or if they even knew what they were gonna fight. It's all the manager doing the talking for them. So I imagine, I'm not to knock any Cambodians, I've never been there, could be a lovely place. There's probably like standards and practices that aren't observed over there, especially when it comes to a midget fighting league. So the challenge is accepted. It's Let me get the number right. How many midgets was it against one lion? 42 midgets. So 42 midgets go against one lion. And according to the story, within 12 minutes, 28 of the fighters were declared dead and the fight was called off. So, I mean, it seems pretty indisputable or undisputable that the lion was victorious. It was a massacre. And that's it. We don't have any names. We don't have any dates, which is why it's kind of hard to pinpoint the authenticity of the story. Many think it's a hoax, and it very well could be. But it is a story, and I think it's an entertaining story, a sick story, a highly disturbing story. I feel like there's so many elements you could chew at and make something out of this.
Yeah, I don't know where to begin. Like, oh yeah, so that was one question I had. Now I'm on the Wikipedia page. I was like, how did they get a fucking lion in Cambodia because I'm guessing there would be tigers. I know there's tigers in India, so that's not that far away. But yeah, they said that after the midgets accepted the challenge, an African lion was flown to was flown to Cambodia, especially for the event. So they sourced a African lion. This is clearly bullshit, but
Spoilers.
it's fun to think of. I hate to ruin your dream, but yeah, like 'cause it seems like it did the rounds back in the early 2000s on tons of radio shows where they were kind of talking about it. But yeah, it's fun to think of what type of movie this could be. There's a million different directions you could take it.
Well, that's why I think the movie approach you would have to be a little unorthodox. Hear me out. We're gonna get experimental with this. So the way the movie is gonna work, we would go to Cambodia and hire 42 Cambodian midgets and
Yep.
just say, hey, we're gonna rent you guys out for the day. We're gonna film a movie, and not necessarily tell them what we're filming. And we're gonna put them in a stadium, and we're gonna have a lion flown in, and a lion is going to be in there with the midgets, and we're just gonna film it and see what happens.
Yeah. So it's gonna be kind of a gonzo. Uh, it's gonna be truth is stranger than fiction type of vibe.
I'm trying to think if I've seen this somewhere, read it in a book, or maybe I don't know. Is it Great Gatsby-esque where you just lie until the lie becomes the truth? Like he
Mm.
just lied his way to success. So maybe it's not a true story, which is a little disappointing. But what if we make it a true story?
Yeah, but then call it a fictional movie. So then it's the exact inverse. This is a hoax presenting itself to be true, and we're going to create a fictional movie which is actually true.
So another approach. I don't know if you've ever heard of the movie Roar from the 80s.
No, who's in that?
No one. But
Okay.
it's kind of infamous, and it's been called the most dangerous movie ever made. So this is a story in and of itself. So there's some dude who just had a bunch of lions for whatever fucking reason at like his house somewhere in California, and he claims he was rescuing them, and he had dozens of lions and eventually tigers and leopards living in his house. And he said, "All right, fuck it, let's make a movie with just a half-assed script thrown together." And his family was involved, actors were hired, and something like 70 people were mauled. I don't think anyone died officially, but a lot of people were sent to the ER. A lot of people were like viciously attacked. And if you look at the footage on YouTube, the actors are clearly not comfortable being on screen with these animals. Like it is not a professional movie. It is as low budget shoestring. Let's just film it and see what happens with these lions that you could get. And it's pretty tense to watch, even knowing the actors survived. Just seeing actors in a like suburban house with lions just fucking around. So that it kind of was what led me to remembering this midget story.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Growing up watching movies, sometimes you're like, how the fuck did they do that? Or even like I remember watching the Rocky movies and all the fucking sweat and the bodily whenever they got punched, being in awe of that. And so the older you get, you lose that the fairy tale aspect of filmmaking gets lost because even if something does look incredibly realistic, like Tom Cruise stunts or the stuff in Death Proof, all the kind of like car stunts, because you've been so desensitized, you're just like, oh, that looks real as fuck and dangerous as fuck, but I'm not going to buy into it because, the magic of filmmaking and all that bullshit. So it's only until you kind of see behind the scenes stuff now that you can really appreciate, you're like, oh, this is insanely dangerous or this was insanely dangerous. So I don't know, with this adaptation, if we lose a couple little people on the way through, that's only going to help the kind of marketing um, of the whole affair.
I was thinking too, with animals in particular, how do I put this? If you're using real animals, especially dangerous animals, you're limited with what you can do with them. But a CGI animal always looks bad. I mean, dragons don't exist, so therefore, if you make a CGI dragon, okay, that looks fine. I'm not taken out of the movie. But recently, I watched that new Predator movie. Did you see it?
No, I never saw it.
It's okay. It's pretty forgettable. Uh, but the movie takes place like in pre-colonial America, and it's about Native Americans and they're tracking animals, and the scenery is really nice. They filmed on location, but there's distractingly bad CGI animals. There's a CGI wolf and a CGI bear, and millions of dollars are poured to make those CGI animals, but your brain is never going to accept that. There's just
Yeah.
something about animals we know that are part of, our world and part of our environment that will never look quite right done with computer animation. But on the other hand, you don't want to put an animal in danger and you don't want to put an actor in danger because animals are quite unpredictable and you don't want to like push their limits, which is kind of what that movie Roar did, which makes that movie all the more kind of astounding that it exists at all. And it's astounding that the worst that happened was that people were maimed and not killed. And so with this Midget movie, goddamn, it's going to be exploiting little people and exploiting animals at the same time. Like this movie would run purely on the reputation of being an exploitation film in the truest sense of
Yeah.
the word.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Hearing you talk that through, uh, that was kind of the appeal of the Werner Herzog movie Grizzly Man, is that everyone watching it was like, I kind of want this guy to get mangled by a bear. Like that was the whole like, oh, this is about human adventure and this closeted guy pretending he wasn't gay, and but then it was like I guess the subtext, everyone was kind of baying for blood, like the whole concept of people don't go to NASCAR to watch people take left turns all day. You want to see a smash every so often. And
Oh yeah,
yeah.
sorry.
No, I'm just and so that's I guess the whole concept of exploitation. Like it's because that thirst, that bloodlust, is within us all. And if you can't get it from the new movies because the CGI animals are shit, well then let's bring in let's fly into African lions. Let's do this.
Well, I was gonna say, to what extent does your sympathy end with Grizzly Man in particular? Do you have sympathy for that man, or is it no? You got what was coming to you.
He got what he was coming to him, and yeah, I think it was kind of like a concept of like suicide by bear, where he was pushing the envelope in an extreme way. And so, what did you think was going to happen?
Well, man, I've noticed, and it's not new. It's been around for a while, but this trend of I don't know what you call it, inspirational animal videos, whether it's on YouTube, Facebook, or social media that people share. And it's always like with that AI of like text to voice narration. This man raised these lion cubs from
Oh
birth,
yeah,
released them into the wild. It's like even after a decade, they remember him. And, it's some hipster guy just like hugging this big lion. And then you look at the comments, love doesn't know species. Like, there's no such thing as dangerous animals, just dangerous people. Or if you could train it, like, they'll be loving. And I think it sets a very bad precedent of easily manipulated and naive people to think that lions are pets or something like a dog or a cat, which those situations of that dude hugging a tiger is definitely not the norm and the exception.
yeah. Yeah, there's also this other kind of disgusting type of video that's become really popular now where it'll often be clearly somewhere in the third world, somewhere like Cambodia or Africa or somewhere, where they will take they'll stumble upon like a python that's wrapped around a dog, like that's choking a dog, and then like kids will come up and save the dog from the python, and they get shared around. They're like, oh, these kids are fucking heroes. That's great. But the reality is that they do that on purpose. They drug the dog and then put them around the python, or they drug the python so it'll get the dog but won't suffocate it immediately, and so that the kids can come along and look like heroes and then get billions of hits. And so it's exploitation on every fucking level. And yeah, I've got pretty controversial. I wouldn't call myself an animal lover, but I respect the natural order in a huge way, and I feel like the way humans have meddled, I don't even like zoos because I feel like even really nice zoos. We went to the Singapore Zoo recently with me and the fam, and it's considered one of the best zoos in the world because you get to do this like nighttime drive where you drive around and then the car stops and then you see like a lion 10 feet away from you, but there's a body of water protecting from you and the lion. And you kind of, I guess it's cool because you get to see it really up close and it seems to be not in a cage. It seems a little more free. It's still a fucking cage. But my issue is the the things you see at a zoo in terms of animals up close and wandering around, that it doesn't compete in any way, shape, or form with what you would see in a David Attenborough documentary in respect to the ferocity or just them kind of like wandering around, hanging with the other lions and all that shit. It's just at a zoo. It's just an animal moping around in general. And so I'm kind of like, why would you spend all that money and kind of deprive an animal of its freedom when Attenborough's already hooked the world up, or like technology's already hooked the world up? We already have amazing footage which you can watch on your widescreen TV from the comfort of your own fucking living room. But instead we like, yeah, I hate the circus aspect of it.
Yeah, I'm.
Yeah,
Oh,
I don't
sorry.
feel like it's no. I just don't feel like there is an actual utility anymore apart from the kind of self-centered taking a selfie next to the lion aspect. You can't really do that in front of your TV, so that I feel like that's why zoos exist. It's still kind of a selfish act to want to be up close to an animal like that. Whereas if you're really interested, watch the fucking documentaries.
Yeah, I mean, I am a hypocrite because I'm never not amazed by animals, things you don't typically see in a suburb or in a city. So when you go to a zoo and you see a lion, you're never going to be bored of looking at a lion. It's always going to be
No.
amazing. But at the same time, I don't think there's an animal on Earth, dim-witted, brilliant, it doesn't matter, who likes being gawked at. Even if they have like, a really cushy enclosure, room to run and do whatever they do. At the end of the day, I don't think there's a living creature, at least a mammal, who likes having dozens and hundreds of eyes on it.
Mm.
Like animals are very instinctual and they feel when they're being watched. They have that fight or flight thing. And if you have eyes on you perpetually, that has to play up their anxiety. I imagine it must.
What do you think about the fact that this story involves the word midget? Because that's essentially off the table now. We should probably even be
Is
saying
that
the
right?
M word.
What?
You should be saying, as far as I'm aware, I believe little person is the correct vernacular.
You know, far be it from me to argue in the case of the M word because I honestly have no idea. Uh, and it's not up to me to be like, no, man, I'm bringing it back. If that's the case, I was not aware. I'm trying to think how. Hmm.
Well, it sounds like you didn't even know about it, so you're not going to know the history of why. But like, I kind of know this because I did this in Perth a couple years ago at the Fringe Festival. There was this podcast there where they asked writers to do 100 word or 99 word stories on a given topic. And so the topic that I wrote about was drunk on a movie set. So I made up this story of this guy in his trailer, kind of like Leo in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He's like drunk and he's berating his agent, and he's throwing shit around his trailer, and he's demanding underage sluts because he's just a fucking animal and he's lost his mind. And so he's berating his agent. He finishes yelling at him, storms out of his stumbles out of his trailer, has a one last swig of Jack, and he's on his way to set. And yeah, the twist in the story is that he's reaching set and he bumps into Joe Pesci. He's like, Macaulay Culkin, how you doing? You ready for the scenes today? And it's little, yeah. And so that's why he's demanding underage sluts, because the boy is underage himself. But but then like I guess the tag of the story, he keeps berating Joe Pesci, and Joe Pesci's like trying to be upbeat with Macaulay Culkin, like, hey, you ready for some big scenes today? And in the story, I said, Macaulay Culkin turned to Pesci and said, shut up, you fucking midget. You got any coke? And so this story, because it was at a live event at the Fringe Festivals, it was recorded, and they gave me the clip on YouTube, and it went pretty well. I got some laughs, and people seem to dig the story. But there's this funny moment when I did the story, when I say midget, you can tell it's like a white woman. She was like, oh, like she was disappointed I used the M word, and yeah, it was kind of an indication for me where I was like, oh, it's definitely crossed it would be equivalent to retard, I think, where even if you'd never been the type of person to call a retard, that still doesn't matter. Even if you're using it like in this context where it's completely outside a lot of people want to take words like midget and retard and essentially make them like the N word, where I wouldn't even outside the context when you're analyzing the word, I still don't even want to say that word now, the N word, because it's so flammable and so dangerous that even just the concept of someone clipping me is not cool. I don't want AI to get a hold of that. So I feel like it's weird with language is that certain words like midget and retard, they get taken off the table, and there is a consensus to kind of push them towards you can't even say them anymore when discussing them. But then it gets confusing because you're like, there's an M word, there's a C word, there's an R word. Yeah, how many letter words can we handle before we lose track?
Man, how silly does that? And I'm never gonna be that person of what can I say if they? It's like no, I don't need to say a word that bad. It's not worth it. Having said that, it just sounds silly. The B word, the C word. It's like aren't we adults?
Yeah. Well, evidently not.
Is this what we are now? I don't know. But actually, I was thinking though, like back to the movie, taking it seriously. I like movies or TV shows that kind of have an omnipotent presence where they're not judging any of the characters. They're just like a silent observer looking at the inner machinations of something happening. And I would kind of like to see just like everything that goes into a fighting league in somewhere like Cambodia in general. You know, who's handling the money, what kind of people go to watch it, who are the fighters, like what brought them to being there. And I think with the previous movie, I kind of mentioned that you follow one character for 10 minutes before the camera kind of fucks off and follows a different point of view. Just because to me, that's more interesting than a traditional narrative of, oh, there's some little fella from Cambodia who's trying to save up money for his dying mom and he goes to fight. And that's boring. So show a couple of the fighters. I'm sure some of them are there by choice. Some of them, similarly to human trafficking, I'm sure were tricked into it or roped into it or forced into it against their will. And the promoters and managers, the people calling the shots, like the really seedy underbelly, I think that makes for interesting, not storytelling, but just observance, because this shit happens. Even if this story is a hoax, I'm sure there's stories going on that aren't far off from what this is.
Yeah, to be honest, the just the mere premise, Cambodian Midget Fighting League, or CMFL, the what immediately appealed to me about it was that I've always been kind of turned off by the Wolf of Wall Street douchebaggery where you have a midget
Right.
throwing competition, and I appreciate in that movie it was very kind of purposeful to illustrate how much of a dick Jordan Belfort was, and or even something like Doctor Evil or whatever, where you're laughing. The whole joke is basically that this guy is different.
Right.
Well, not Doctor Evil, sorry, Mini Me. Yeah,
Midnight.
where
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, you're laughing at the kind of contrast. Whereas what appeals to me about this is that like it's literally they're fighting someone their own size. That's it. You could be the Joe Rogan of little people, MMA guy, fucking extremely well versed in martial arts, but then you come up against just a regular sized human who does no exercise. Just it's such a disadvantage. Whereas in their own league, they have the opportunity to kind of fucking be a real Chad and get crowds to lose their shit, but over it. So I think it's I don't know that it. I guess you could. I feel like just this whole episode is me saying non-woke shit, but you could essentially be like this is equivalent to like female sports or something where yeah, I like watching females beat each other up in a cage with a female MMA match, even though objectively speaking, I feel like even a low-level male fighter could go over there and fuck them up. I'm not thinking that way. I'm like, wow, she dominated. She was a boss in that fight. So I like the kind of egalitarian aspect of how this could actually be empowering, at least initially in the movie, but then but then it gets corrupted, and then for some reason they are 42 of them get co-opted into fighting a lion. Is kind of like the perfect. It's almost like a metaphor for how like organized sport becomes could start off as a beautiful egalitarian democratic thing, and then eventually some bastard realizes how to monetize it in an extreme way, and then you send in the lion from Africa.
Speaking of Mini-Me, the actor, I don't know if you're aware, but he killed himself.
Yeah, and he had like a
And I'm pretty
sex
sure.
tape. He was just a fucking animal, wasn't he?
Well, that's the thing, man. I'm not going to presume to read someone's mind or assume, what they knew or felt. So I'm thinking about me. Let's say I had something that I was very subconscious about, like live my entire life with it, and that was the one thing I got famous for. I got paid for it. I got
Mm.
exposure. I was, quote unquote popular, liked, but it was for a reason I was inherently like self-conscious about.
Yeah.
I, because I've never been in that situation, I've never had to cope with that. And I honestly don't know how I would. How do you think you would if there's something that kept you up at night? You were bullied from your childhood because of it. It prevented you from doing the things all the kids in your neighborhood did. And suddenly you're famous for it, but that's all people want you to be famous for.
This is a perfect analogy for fame in the internet age, is that I think it's kind of reverted back to a freak show model where in order to get famous, you do actually have to showcase the most heinous, embarrassing, disgusting parts of yourself in order to stand out. But because in terms of my darkest moments, or I guess most not darkest, but like most embarrassing fame whore moments where I've been like, oh, I should get tons of more subscribers, or I need more follows on social media, and you start doing kind of like a moral inventory of like what are the kind of like weirdest parts of myself I could turn up to 11. And that's because I think that there is actually a rationale people would do that, is that we want freaks. Freaks are inherently interesting. People having reasonable opinions or just kind of making very I don't know, tepid, nuanced commentary on human behavior isn't really that enthralling. You have to you have to kind of sit still and pay attention to it to read a book or something like that. So I've thought to myself, like, yeah, I could start acting crazy on the internet and then that would gain me more attention. And so, yeah, I feel like someone like Vern Troyer, and that's even kind of more insidious because he didn't ask to be born that size, and he just kind of like that was maybe he was a brilliant poet or some other shit going on, but yeah, I definitely feel like uh there is a almost a pull for people to become more extreme or to turn themselves into freaks now in order to gain attention. And I resist it, but I feel like I'm definitely aware that that's kind of a reality of fame in the modern age.
I think in Vern Troyer's case, though, and people with similar situations, like you said, they didn't choose it. So even when you're, say, a freak, a lot of the people who choose it, they do it on their terms, and they do it in a
Yeah.
way that's like it's weird, but it's kind of cool. It's kind of sexy too. Like a lot of porn stars, I feel like a lot of people, you could call it a shameful profession or whatever, but it's attention, and a lot of people, men and women alike, do get off on attention. And
Mm.
it's one of those things are like, oh, aren't you ashamed if your kids know or your grandparents know? I think a good number of them don't give a shit. They're like, dude, like people are looking at me, people are lusting after me, and I'm getting paid for it. Like I'm a
Yeah.
hot commodity. I'm a freak, but I'm like a desirable freak.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And then it kind of like it begs the question of being like, well, everyone's a prostitute in some capacity. People do things they don't want to do to get by at work. Even the most boring of office jobs requires some type of demeaning tasks for you to get by. And so I think, yeah, people can extrapolate that and be like, well, if I'm going to have to do demeaning shit to get by, it may as well be on my terms. And I don't know, yeah, in some area where I have a kink or a personal interest. And yeah, I feel I actually had this conversation with a buddy on over the weekend about people who've been in porn. We were kind of saying how widespread it is for people to get involved now with like OnlyFans, and how it's kind of surprising that people would tarnish their relationship. And I said, yeah, I think that, but when I kind of think about myself, if I found out a person that I knew had a sex tape, professional or amateur, and it was out there on the internet, it was out there in the world, it wouldn't change my impression of them. It would just be like something that they'd done, in the past, like as in they'd been a part of the, joined the military or went backpacking for a few years. It would
Mm.
just be a part of their personal biography, which I would pay attention to and maybe be like, oh, I wonder if they'll, like they'll I can sense some things they've picked up from that that time in their lives. But if they're a cool person in the moment, and I don't know, they treat me with respect, I'll treat them with respect. So I look at, but yet I'm still looking at ex porn stars and thinking, how are they walking around in the world? Like there's all these people judging them. And of
Mhm.
course, there would be some people judging them, but maybe there's a lot more people with a non-judgmental mindset like myself out there. Like I'm being judgmental about the amount of judgmental people there are. If you catch
Yeah,
what I
it's
mean.
understandable.
Yeah.
I,
So
I, I think on that,
yeah, I don't know. Like where would you sit on that barometer?
dude,
Like if you met
I
someone
I
who'd
have
done porn.
hold on, I'll get back around to it, but I just
Yeah.
I have this weird, I don't even want to say complex, but this weird thing. Like, speaking of being judgmental, I try my best not to be, but every single person is. But I even get angry at myself when I internally judge someone I don't know. Like, maybe I just
Mm.
see someone who kind of has a weird head, and even if I don't say the words, my mind says it. And it's like, if I'm saying it, that person knows they have a weird looking head. They don't need someone else to point it out. And so, like, at least sometimes people are nice enough not to. But you meet dickheads. They're like, hey, by the way, like, you have a big head, or like, oh, you're getting fatter, like, god damn, you have a big fucking nose. It's just like, hey, man, the person you're telling that to, they're aware. They don't need to hear you say it. Like, if you
Yeah.
know it, they fucking notice it. And so whenever I see someone and a thought like that comes into my mind, or like, oh, what an ugly mole, or like, oh, that person has weird legs, or look at the cankles on that person, I feel bad. I feel guilty, despite the fact that I'll likely never even talk to that person. I get mad that I even think it.
Yeah, but it can go the other way though. There's the late great comedian Patrice O'Neill. He had a special called "The Elephant in the Room." I guess it was a play on the joke, playing on the fact that he was a big, heavy fella. But it was also because this guy was like the dude who would, if a guy walked in missing an arm, he'd be like, "What happened to your arm, man?" Like he would always be the guy, but people who knew him seem to suggest that he did it in a playful, endearing, and actually a way that relieved the tension. Because I'm like yourself, I make a point of like, because that voice in your head is essentially like your instinct. It's like that girl has a huge forehead. Don't breathe with her. You'll have like yeah. There's all these kind of like fucking evolutionary imprints that we have in our brain. That's why we have those inner voices, kind of like that person's acting obnoxious. Don't be his friend. Like you're getting all these kind of like call to arms, which your body is like explaining this is how you should act accordingly. But then you've got polite society on top of that, and I reckon our culture, our kind of like nurture can sometimes be so overbearing in some cultural situations where you just like you're so divorced from that natural instinct to notice the big forehead or the obnoxiousness. So someone who can actually cut the tension and discuss it in a playful way, let the cat out of the bag. I think it can be relieving for everyone in the room, especially the person with the big forehead or the person missing the arm, because they're like, finally, someone's got the balls to ask. Because it would be written on your eyes. You think you've got a poker face when David's keeping that thought inside his head, but your eyes are probably like giving you away in the
Your eyes
moment.
betray you. I mean,
Yeah.
mine simply do. I've got wandering eyes, and it's pretty bad. But I mean, I'm a curious person. If I see something I don't see every day, uh, oh my God. For example, uh, the other day I saw a. I can't use the M word. Uh, I saw.
What's the M word again?
What are they called?
A little
What are they?
little person.
Gnomes? Little people. I
Yeah,
saw.
yeah. Gnomes. You got Lord of the Rings on the brain.
You'll edit that out.
Yeah,
Anyways, I
yeah.
saw a little person, and nothing unusual is happening. I just don't see one every day, and
Yeah.
so I did a quick glance, and then I was like, oh, dude, don't stare. Like he's probably used to people doing that, and he didn't seem bothered. He was going about his day. He probably had work to do, and was going about his routine. But the human mind, I guess, betrays you. Your eyes betray you. You see something that you don't see on a daily basis. And not quite about porn. You asked about porn, but sort of on the topic of exploitation, pornography, just movies in general, cinema. Is there ever a case when nudity in a movie is not exploitation? I mean, you could talk all
Yeah.
you want about how it's for the plot, it's, character driven, blah, blah, blah. Having said that, unless it's that lion movie I was talking about, violence in a movie, as visceral as it might be, is still simulated. Like
Hmm.
deaths in a movie are still simulated. But when it comes to like nudity and sex scenes, they get like as close to it being real without it officially being real. You know what I mean? Like those aren't simulated body parts, with few exceptions. I've heard like there's some where it's just like, oh, they use like prosthetics to make it look bigger, or it's a body double, but that body double is still a real body.
Yeah. Well,
Can you
yeah,
think?
but it's the concept of like gratuitous nudity or gratuitous sex. It's like, isn't that all nudity and sex? Like, what sex or nudity isn't gratuitous? In I guess you could maybe give the example of like Schindler's List or something like that, where people are
Sure.
like stripped and ushered into a fucking gas chamber or some shit, where it's like, yeah, there's literally, if you're finding something sexual out of that, we need you on the pod ASAP.
But yeah, you could say that's gratuitous in a different way though, because it's meant to evoke terror, and
Yeah,
you're essentially doing the exact same thing to the actors that happened to the real people. I don't know. I'm not saying I disagree with it. I'm not saying there's no place for nudity in a movie. I'm just trying to find a justification for it without it being like a producer wanted to see this girl get her tits out.
yeah,
Like at the end of
definitely.
the day,
Yeah,
you could do clever things with editing and camera angles. You could have a sex scene where it looks like the actors are naked, but parts like Austin Powers, they're strategically hidden by different things, so you don't actually see the nasty bits. I don't
I've
know. I
I've
don't know
thought
where.
about I've thought about this the concept of simulating sex or kind of like giving you the sexualized images, for example, like Baywatch, tits bouncing on the beach, but like no exposed nudity or kind of vaginal stuff going on. Because I think back to my own childhood, going on the internet when I was like 11 or 12, 13, that age, and like because I'd been raised on Baywatch and the hot chick in Saved by the Bell or something like that, where I'm like, I knew I was attracted to them. I like staring at boobs. I liked symmetrical faces and like long hair and like, but when I actually saw full intercourse the first few times, it was like, always in retrospect, I think I just saw it too young. Like I was not ready for it yet, and it was like
It's
a little.
terrifying.
It's terrifying. Yeah, you're like, how does that not hurt? How are these people not in pain? And then there's, yeah, it's also kind of like, at least the porn that, well, the things that I was seeing, there often was still images, which now I kind of know how that works, where it would be like staged, and so they're trying to have expressions of ecstasy and stuff like that, but their mouths are open. They're kind of like, yeah, it looks like they're just in pain or whatever. So I think that like in terms of the simulation and stuff like that, people may never grow out of that. Like they don't want to be slapped over the face with something like heavy explicit intercourse, because it's like it's just too confronting for they were, I guess, maybe traumatized by that concept, or they just mollycoddled by the softcore stuff and never I like to think I graduated out of that and became like a relatively normal. My sexuality is in the ballpark of normal, at least I like to think so. And yeah, but I don't know. It's because, yeah, in terms of my son, I want him to go slowly. I don't want him to be like, yeah, see a few tits on Baywatch, and then like all of a sudden he's 9 years old and seeing what I occasionally look at on fucking streaming sites. Like, it should be gradual. And yeah, I think movies seem to kind of at least cater to that somewhat.
Yeah, and just let him be a kid for a while. Goddamn, we don't need to get corrupted too quickly. But about again, simulated sex scenes. Whenever there's a movie that comes out where there's and like it's part of their marketing, it's part of the, oh, this movie has like non-simulated sex scenes, like the actors really went at it. And then you watch the movie and it's just a pretty the movies are almost unanimously just not that interesting. So
Yeah.
you always ask, what was it for? Was it just for extra buzz, like for like to garner a reputation, to become a cult classic? Or is it because the director and the actors actually thought it meant something? Like it actually matters that the sex has to be real? Because you watch movies where it's simulated, it could have fooled me. It looks pretty real. Like other than like not showing penetration, like the actors are acting their asses off. So at no point do I think, oh man, like I would have bought this so much more if like they were actually going at it.
I'm going to let you in on to one of my theories here is that if you cast your mind back to high school, I found myself, this is when I was, everyone's having their sexual awakening. You're developing your crushes on your kind of dream girls that are unattainable in terms of media, movie stars, and kind of, I don't know, girls on the TV or whatever. So they're the kind of dream hot girls. You got your porn star girls as well. But then there's the chicks you go to school with. And yeah, there may be some um, like really hot chicks at your high school or whatever, usually typically with older boyfriends. But then what I found in terms of my first few kind of forays into masturbation was that occasionally some 6 out of 10 girls from my high school who were in my closer proximity would slip into my fantasies and I would give them, they'd get a 20% bump in my rating when I was having these internal fantasies. So like all of a sudden these 6 out of 10s were becoming 8s, sometimes 9s. And I was aware of this from a very early age. And I was like, what is going on there? And I think I figured out that it's about attainability. It's like there's a proximity and there's a closeness and a connection to those 6 out of 10s or 7 out of 10s because I'm literally next to them in science class and you see all their flaws, but you actually see the kind of their good their good qualities closer up and so the good qualities get even hotter and because they're attainable you can overlook the bad qualities whereas the person on the TV or the porn star is unattainable. So I think taking it back to movies, that's why like when Anne Hathaway gets her tits out, even though she's not as hot as the porn stars that I last out, like the porn stars that are out there, they're built for sex, they're good at sex, their bodies are perfect for that, and their personalities and everything. Anne Hathaway gets her tits out. It's like, well, she's got big boobs, but I don't know. There's something kind of disappointing about the nudity just purely on a visual scale, but you still want to see it because you've been watching Anne Hathaway movies for 15 years and you feel like you know her somehow. So there's an intimacy there and that's why the marketing tool works because we all consider her like kind of more of I don't know, a girlfriend versus just like a porn star who's just kind of like a one night stand for you.
See, when we did the episode about the mail order brides, and like one of my reasons for being interested in that story was to see what goes on when the cameras aren't rolling. So I would love to be a fly in the wall, not the casting couch, like nothing perverted like that, but the fly in the wall when the producers or the agents or whoever are like talking to an actress of Anne Hathaway's caliber or Halle Berry, whoever it is. Like, yeah, this is the role. This is like this scene, tits bounce out and the camera's gonna like be on your naked body for this many minutes. It just how do those conversations go down? Because it's quite common actually, just how many actresses have been nude in movies, like really famous actresses, award-winning actresses. Like, goddamn, like for this movie's not even that good. Like, why do you take your clothes off for this movie? What the
Yeah,
hell?
I don't know. Also, kind of like at a fundamental level, all these women that we're talking about, they're theater chicks. Like, theater girls are fucking crazy sluts in the best way possible. Like, and
Yeah.
believe it, that is a huge compliment. A crazy arty slut. Like, that's a guy. I don't know for a guy like myself, that's an amazing woman. Someone who's kind of like willing to buy into this kind of like fabricated reality. And I only did one serious stage thing. It was at university. I did me and a buddy got drunk one time at the tavern, and they were having auditions for that semester's dramatic production, and it was for a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles play, and me and him, we were drunk. The guys who were auditioning us were drunk. We got in, and it was this kind of like secret society, and there was all this like drama and people fucking each other, and like, oh, she gave him the clap and all this stuff, but it was like everyone was kind of buying into this ridiculous play that this guy had written, and we were pretending to be the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Fucking great times, great parties, crazy women, and so fun. Even though one out of a million of those chicks goes on to become Halle Berry or Anne Hathaway, they've still got the crazy, um, you know, drama slut within them somewhere, and they're willing to go along with the dream of like, yeah, this would be so much cooler if you got your tits out in this scene or whatever. So, I like it when, obviously, because I'm a fucking man and a pervert, I want them to do that. But then it's also kind of like, yeah, YOLO, baby. Do it for the art. Like, let's fucking push it out there. I'm not gonna judge you. And as I was saying before, I like to think there's tons of people out there who don't make it weird. Of course, there would be lots who make it weird, but I don't know. It's hard to know which way the way the culture is moving, because OnlyFans and things like that are becoming so normalized. Are people going to be more cool about if your nudes get spread around at your high school compared to how they were 10 years ago? I'd like to think yes, because the media has been flooded with all these images. I think child stuff is a different story. Anywhere that should never be okay. Any type of that, for that to be normalized. But if someone's of age and they share stuff, uh, you know, they put it out into the world, then I like to think we could be more. It would be a better world if more of us were cool with that happening.
Yeah, because it's essentially harmless. Again,
Mm.
when it's, consensual. When it's someone like stealing it off of someone else's computer and showing it against, like, without someone's permission, that's fucked. But what annoys me is when you hear stories of teachers getting fired for like racy photos that were discovered of them. It's like, so what? That has nothing to do with teaching. And then you always get that American Puritan, oh well, they're teaching kids, and it's like, yeah, they're not giving the picture to the kids. How'd you find it? Your husband found this picture? Well, what was he doing? Like,
Mm.
sort things out with your husband and not the teacher.
Just to kind of go back to the movie for a second here, how do you imagine like the transition from kind of like it just being the midget fighting league into like it escalating into the lion getting involved, and how would the movie end in your opinion? I'm curious on your kind of like your your plot arc.
So, similar to the last episode where we didn't want to turn the story about the twins into like a farcical comedy. Like, it's so silly, they're twins. How wacky is it gonna get? It's like, no, this is pretty fucked. So
Yeah.
for me, you would follow these wrestlers. You can't follow all 40. That's too many characters. But a good number of them throughout their trials and tribulations, see their everyday life, see the conditions they live in, like see the relationships they have with each other, and their motivations for wanting to fight and what life aspirations they have.
Mm.
And in my imagination, they wouldn't be fully told exactly what they're going up against. Just like, hey, like, we're gonna put it on a good show, and like, don't worry, it's totally fine. Like, if things get too wild, we'll call off the fight. We're gonna have you like fight some animals. Like, maybe we'll have like a big bobcat or something. And they don't tell them that
Mm.
it's a full-grown male lion. And so I would have it be almost like David Attenborough documentary style without him, or maybe with him narrating. I'm not sure if I want it to be a shitty movie or a good movie.
It's his last role before he croaks.
So, we always do that thing as humans, where when we hear about a tragedy, like a shooting or a fight, we always say, like, oh, I just would have done this, this, or this. It's like, that's easy to say with like prior knowledge of what happened, but if you're in a situation, you don't know what you would do. Like sometimes
Mm-hmm.
you're so confused or unprepared for what's happening, you freeze, and it has nothing to do with being a coward. When you're caught unawares, you just react differently. Everyone reacts differently. So I imagine, again, we're taking at face value that this story happened. A lot of these people were probably in shock, and that's how the lion was able to kill him. Because you would think if 40 people like had a strategy and coordinated, they could probably take out a lion. Like I feel like 20 people probably could. Two people, no. Five people, probably not. Having said that, if they're not coordinated and they're running in every which direction and panicking, the lion's probably freaking out too. He's probably just swiping and clawing. He's probably just as scared as they are, but he's an aggressive lion. So I would really want to focus on the confusion. I wouldn't want to focus on gratuitous blood. I think that's cheap, but I wouldn't want to hide away from it either. It'd be like really quick, gruesome shots just to emphasize that this is a horrible thing happening. Um, I wouldn't want to film audience cutaway reactions. I think that's a cheap gimmick too. I hate in movies whenever it's a fight. Like, did you ever see the movie Troy with Brad Pitt?
Yeah.
It's an okay movie, but one thing that I found really cheesy was how the king just had like the perfectly situated seat where he could watch the battle and like he just saw everything. It's like I don't know. That just seems convenient where everyone's watching when only the important characters kill each other. When it's everyone else, it doesn't matter. So whenever there's cutaways to them watching the battle, I thought that was kind of corny. So I wouldn't want to do something like that. Uh, I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't even be the end of the movie. Maybe it'd be like 2/3 of the way in, and then you just like focus on the surviving fighters, and things just kind of get forgotten. The promoter's like, all right, get over it. Like they died, they lost the fight, but like you have a fight tomorrow, and just like, it becomes kind of mundane again, and they don't even like dwell on it.
Yeah, fucking hell. Just the heaviness of it kind of is overcoming, like, because, yeah, in terms of 42, I'm just imagining that, like, because what, if the 42 little people fighting a lion, like if a scary fucking dog comes at you, a boxer or something, one thing I've heard that, like, the only, if a dog like that is angry, or a pit bull, you're essentially fucked. The only thing you can do if you don't have like a firearm or something is to basically poke it up its ass or like that. That's literally the only thing that'll stop it.
Yeah.
So I'm just picturing 42 little people here. That they could maybe hold it down for a second, but like the only thing that I could see them doing that would stop the lion from like actually gnawing through flesh would be to like poke it up its butt, and then I'd imagine there'll be some type of stalemate where the lion would just be like, yeah, I don't want to fight anymore. So that's the only possible path to victory I see for the little people would be to kind of like poke enough so that the lion was like, no, fuck this, I can't deal with any more kind of anal inspections. But yeah, otherwise I don't think 42 little people would stand a chance. Maybe 42 regular sized humans.
Because they called the fight off after 28 were dead. So
Yeah.
you think under no circumstances 42 could how many would it take? Do you think 100 could take on the lion?
Something like 100 maybe would work because you could literally just suffocate it at that point, where it would just do a massive pylon and the weight of it, and it would maybe take a few attempts because you could do a human pyramid on top of it and it could wriggle out, and then you'd pile on it again, and then I think eventually through exhaustion and asphyxiation you'd get it with 100, but not 42. I don't think that's enough weight.
So I think what you would do then is like wait 40 years and kind of do for this franchise what Creed was to Rocky. So you would have the
Okay.
sons of the original. I almost said the M word. The original little people, and then the
Yeah.
son of the lion, and they fight against each other.
Here's a concept. One of the little people he's a baby in the crowd. No crowd shots in the original, but you know that his mother's like with child. He gets killed, but the mother's a regular sized human, and she gives birth to like a regular sized human. That's the Apollo Creed kid, yeah, in this new franchise. But in his father's memory, he gets body reduction surgery and turns himself into a little person for the fight.
And what would be even better if you got like a method actor, a Cambodian method actor, who got body reduction surgery to play this role.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, he full Christian bailed it. Yeah, he went all out. But
Speaking of, did you ever hear the movie Tiptoes?
no, what's
This
that?
movie's amazing. Gary Oldman, full-size man, plays a little person in the movie, and it's legitimately just him on his knees. But
I think I have seen this. It's like in the 90s, right? I don't think I've seen a trailer for it because I've heard people discussing it.
and if that wasn't like fucked already, Peter Dinklage, who is a little person, is in the movie, but not the lead role. Because like, well, no, like you haven't been in Game of Thrones yet. We're getting it to Gary Oldman. We're gonna make a movie about a little person, but we can't have a little person on the poster. That's fucked.
It's hilarious. To wind things out, I remember a couple episodes ago I did like um a hypothetical. I can't remember what I asked, but the question I'm going to ask you today is what has been the kind of worst era of your life? Like which era of David's existence do you look back and cringe the most? And I'll give you I'll kind of I'll give you some time to think because I'll tell you mine. But the one that I'm most embarrassed about was like probably a year or so prior to that kind of fun experience when I was in that play university. But I went through a phase where I shortly after I started drinking, so it was like 18 or 19, where I I understood the concept because I'd been like getting drunk at parties since I was like 15 or 16 of like pacing yourself and not drinking too much too early. But I think I just got, I don't know, I thought of myself as like Slash from Guns N' Roses in like the early 90s where I could be like, no, you can just like pound a bottle of Jack and you'll be fine. And so I just had no regulation of my alcohol intake. And so there was like I would like throw up and do some say some embarrassing shit. But more often than not, I would just like pass out and go to sleep. There was like a story of me where we all my friends went out to some club. I put a bottle of something in me on the way there in like the cab. So by the time I got there, I made it past the bouncers, but I was legless. And it was like fucking 9 p.m. on a Saturday night. They were like, oh, so this cunt's fucking rendered himself incapacitated already. What are we going to do with him? So they threw me under a staircase. They found a staircase in this nightclub. I slept for 4 hours and then they came and got me when they wanted to leave. And so anyway, I find that the most embarrassing part of my life because I knew better. I knew how to pace myself. I just purposefully didn't. So it wasn't an ignorance thing. And I did some embarrassing stuff, but if I'm being brutally honest, it was just like the amount of fun. Now that my life is so busy and full of all this responsibility, I look back and I was like, for a year, I wasted all that time when I could have actually been having experiences where I would just like render myself incapacitated out of some type of like rock star proclivity that was completely false and fake. So anyway, that's mine where I'm most ashamed about.
See, for mine's in a way almost even more pathetic. So high school, but not in the way that's like cliche. Because it wasn't like, oh man, I was a nerd, I was bullied. It wasn't even that. I literally did not have a personality. Like I had no hobbies, I had no interests, I had no goals. I did not think of the future at all. I was a blank slate, but not in an interesting or like endearing way. I just didn't know. Like growing up, I never thought about what I wanted to be or what I wanted to do. I didn't really do sports. I did swimming, but that was kind of it. I wasn't really interested in sports. I wasn't interested in anything. I just, it never crossed my mind that it was worth pursuing things. And now, because for the past couple of years, I've worked with kids, I've worked with teens, I read their essays, and just seeing a 14-year-old talking about programming and IT and how he wants to go to such and such institute, it blows my mind because even up until like I was about to graduate high school, college was not on my mind. I didn't know the names of different college or what majors worth pursuing or why this place was considered prestigious or not. I didn't know about things that I'm interested in now, like different language schools or different study abroad programs or writing fellowships, things that seem incredibly invaluable that I wish I had known and cared about. But there's nothing I could do about it at this point. I can't go back in time and push myself in that direction. But goddamn, I wish I had. I wish I gave a shit as a kid about my studies and about like trying to learn skills.
Youth is wasted on the young, baby.
Fucking hey.
But yeah, look, this is us opening up to the audience and sharing little hidden parts of ourselves. All right, well, that's another episode. Thanks, bro. And until next time, peace the fuck out.